Gillian, thank you so much for joining us here at Empower.
Pleasure.
A year after we last sat down together.
Time flies.
I know, and I think at that point the consumer duty was really fully coming into force. And talking about that today, a year on, really, what has the impact been on operations, and what does it mean for future innovation, really?
Yes, great question. If I go back to pre-implementation, as you know, I work very heavily in the advisor space, and advisors were typically saying, this is not really going to have an impact on my business, based on our the Schroeder advisor survey, actually, because we asked lots of questions about it. And that was in May of last year. Post-implementation, we suddenly saw that completely swing, and in November, advisors were saying, oh my goodness, this is having an impact on my business. So they'd woken up to the fact that this wasn't just, TCF on steroids, or we're doing it anyway, we just need to write it down. And I think what's really interesting is the regulator being data-led from an operations perspective. So it's really important that the data is correct, and that in terms of innovations, from an advisor perspective, it's how do I genuinely assess fair value, and I make sure I get client feedback. And that's been an area for us, particularly where we've used technology and operations to try and drive that, in terms of how do you develop and design something that enables advisors to follow that up with clients. But we've also seen things like transparency of charges, again, on platforms. What does that look like? Consumer duty in terms of no customer detriment. So things like pension transfers, how do we make sure that they get moved quickly so that the clients aren't out the market, for example. So there's just multiple examples, I think, of where operations is having to really think through the impact of consumer duty, and that's both for the advisors, but also platforms and asset managers.
And I guess it sounds like putting the end customer very much at the heart of what the priority has to be, and that's something that the new fintechs are also seemingly arguably very good at, engaging more with customers. And really, how have the traditional investment management companies got to keep up, and how do they go about making sure they're not being left behind and staying competitive?
I mean, it's a great question, isn't it? Because the fintechs can deliver distribution, and I think what we're seeing is predominantly the fintechs are still operating in that early accumulation phase, but actually the target market there is beginning to become more interesting. So we're seeing some that are looking at how do we deliver LTAFs and private assets and semi-liquid, for example, to that kind of a demographic, which I find quite interesting. I mean, obviously, simple solutions like multi-asset funds are absolutely in the sweet spot for there. But I think we are starting to see a slightly different demographic, maybe using direct, particularly an age group, just thinking about some of those platforms. So it's so important for asset managers to constantly think about the overall product that they're delivering. Tokenization, we talk about fractionalization. So there's a lot of technology that still needs to support what the asset managers are going to deliver. But it's not now just, when I first started dealing with the fintechs, a lot of them are all about just let's deliver sustainable products. And I think we're seeing a slightly different landscape, but it's still about that early accumulation phase, as opposed to that kind of what I would call full fat advice, where the client really needs something different in decumulation.
I guess the consumer has got a very different feel for those companies, though, and that is something that asset managers need to look at, because the touch points for those fintech companies are very different, and that is what consumers are expecting now.
You're absolutely right,
isn't it?
and they can't dismiss it. You're absolutely right, but it's just about really understanding what is the target market there. And I fundamentally, I'm a big advocate for financial advice, and I still fundamentally think that with the fintechs, if we can get people to start to invest at an early stage and really engage, so it's not just about product, it's about what's the customer journey like, what education do I get on that platform, how can we give them great quality reporting in terms of sustainable solutions, then that's what's got to make the difference, and that's where asset managers can absolutely play their part.
And that's actually what consumer duty is trying to achieve in the long run anyway, isn't it, as well?
Consumer understanding is one of the 4 key outcomes, so it plays right into that, yes.
So looking at the bigger picture, how are wealth and asset managers going to drive growth now, and alongside value for customers, because we talk a lot about growth and we've heard that on the agenda here, but there's got to be the value for the customer as well.
It's really interesting because obviously I've just chaired a panel on this, and it was almost like, how do you resolve a tension between growth and delivering value? And if value is just price, which we know is not right, but if that's the way it's being observed, then is it just a race to the bottom as opposed to delivering genuine value to the client? And I think we're still at early stages in some respects. If I speak to advisors about this, it's how do I articulate the value? Because value to many advised clients is almost intangible. We talk about it in terms of, it means I can sleep at night, I'm reassured, but how do you put a price on that? We're at Benchmark, where I am, we're spending a lot of time with our advisors thinking that through. But also then it's about, how can we deliver efficiency to advisors so that they can service a much broader community? How do we address the advice gap? How can we use AI and other technology to really enable them to deliver advice more efficiently and more cost effectively from a value perspective, and then service more clients?
It's almost sort of embracing the innovation but not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, if you like.
Absolutely, but it was really interesting having this whole cost value debate, and to what extent is the regulator ensuring that we're actually driving the right outcomes? Because at the end of the day, this is all about making sure that we deliver the right outcomes for customers, but we've got to get the segmentation right as well. That was something that came through loud and clear on the panel. How are we really clear about what our different customer segments are? And actually, what I thought was interesting was we might actually need to be a bit brutal and exclude some of them. Where do we want to play and where do we not want to play? But at the end of the day, it's got to be, in terms of innovation, I think, loud and clear coming through was, it's got to be about technology so that we can service and deliver investment to a broader range of people.
Because this industry has been a little bit slow on the uptake, one could say, in that tech becoming mainstream, if you like.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And maybe, I fundamentally believe we are a relationship business. That's what we do. But actually, if you can use the tech in the back office to just take away some of the harder work, just to make the business more efficient, then it's got to be about then taking that slack up and spending more time with clients. It feels like a no-brainer, really.
It's kind of supercharging the expertise that you already have.
Absolutely, and I think, I'm a big advocate for AI, and I do think we're still at slightly early stages of it. And I talked earlier about, are we at VHS Betamax moment for any of us old enough to remember? Are we still in early stages? But and so you could argue that might be the case, but I think we just need to grasp it and keep trying it and seeing where it can add, real value, possibly get overall costs down as well. So there are huge opportunities, I think, in the market to deliver some of this at the end of the day, to ensure that clients get the best possible outcome.
Well, thank you so much, Gillian. Always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your optimistic insights.
I'm very optimistic. Thank you.